Good afternoon. I call to order this hearing of the Intelligence and Special Operations Subcommittee on U.S. Special Operations Forces and Command, Challenges and Resource Priorities for fiscal year 2024. I would like to first welcome our newest member to the subcommittee, Representative Jennifer McClellan of Virginia. Hi.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm very excited to be here.
Well, welcome. And I served with your predecessor. Don and I came in together, and, God rest his soul, but glad you're here and looking forward to working with you as we move through these things. Okay. The United States today finds itself in a shifting strategic landscape in which great power competition will be the defining geopolitical feature over the coming decades. With that, our Special Operations Forces similarly find themselves at an inflection point. After 20 years of the global war on terrorism, the SOF enterprise is retooling and retraining for the threats and competition posed by China and other strategic adversaries. This will not be easy, as limited budgets compel the Department and Congress to make difficult budget decisions, especially as it pertains to special operations. While U.S. SOCOM remains tasked with combating the continued threat posed by violent extremist organizations and other non-state actors, our Special Operations Forces will remain the tip of the spear in competing against and deterring our strategic adversaries, creating strategic dilemmas and making them think twice about their own capabilities. As we discuss U.S. SOCOM's priorities for the coming year's budget, we must examine which capabilities and tools used for the CT mission may also be used against state adversaries in great power competition, as well as what capabilities must be developed or expanded. These capabilities and tools may range from counter-UAS and advanced ISR technologies to cyber and web-based tools to compete and win in the information environment and increased clandestine operations. We similarly must examine the force structure of the SOF enterprise to ensure that SOCOM is adequately manned to compete and operate in great power competition. As a small single-digit percentage of the overall force, any cuts in personnel to the SOF enterprise will have a disproportionate effect on the ability of SOF to execute required operations. Make no mistake, as we look to compete with and deter adversaries like China and Russia, our special operators will remain at the tip of the spear, shaping the environment and creating conditions for successful follow-on operations by the Joint Force. In short, if we are looking to prepare the military services for a high-end fight with a near-peer adversary, then we must ensure that our Special Operations Forces are properly manned, equipped, and trained to enable the rest of the force. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses on the priorities for U.S. Special Operations ahead of Congress work on the FY24 budget and NDAA. With that, I would like to welcome our witnesses here today. The Honorable Christopher Maier serves as the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Special Operations and Low-Intensity Conflict, and General Bryan P. Fenton, who currently serves as the 13th Commander of U.S. Special Operations Command. In the interest of time, I ask the witnesses to keep their opening remarks to 5 minutes or less so that we can have sufficient time for question and answers. With that, let me thank our witnesses for appearing before us today, and I now recognize the ranking member for today, Representative Slotkin, who's filling in for Representative Gallego for any opening remarks.
Great. Real quickly, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for convening us on this hearing. I also want to welcome HAS's newest member, Representative McClellan. It's great to have you here. We are, I think, doing something historic. I believe this is the first time in a long time that two Michiganders have chaired a HASC subcommittee. I'm happy to be here with Mr. Bergman, my fellow Michigander. And I think from my perspective, the global security environment, we all know it's changing. We all know we've shifted towards, great power competition. We all know that from Ukraine to the Chinese Communist Party to Iran, North Korea, violent extremist groups, it's dynamic to say the least, and that these changes need to be explained to the American people so that we can understand not just what we've gone through in the last 20, 25 years in the wake of the wars of Iraq and Afghanistan, but how we chart the future forward, particularly with the unique capabilities of the Special Forces community. We have asked the Special Forces in the last 20 years to really focus on counterterrorism, countering violent extremism, Iraq, Afghanistan, other hotspots elsewhere. I lived this firsthand as a CIA officer, working alongside and often living with the Special Forces on 3 tours in Iraq. And we know that the importance and the danger of the work that our Special Forces took part in. And while we still need to maintain that capability and not lose sight of those gains, I think we really need to help explain and chart the way forward on today and tomorrow. What is the role of the Special Forces in an era of increased great power competition? Do you have the right training, manning, equipping, institutional support, professional military education? Do the lessons of the last 20 years carry forward, or do we think about things in a different way and adjust doctrine? These are some of the core questions that I'm hoping to hear a little bit about today. You all will have, one way or another, an essential role in what I understand is, the national defense security strategy going forward. The word deter was mentioned 56 times in that strategy, and I think it's very clear that the Special Forces community is going to have a really key and essential role in that deterrence. Look forward to hearing from our witnesses, and hand it back over to the chairman.
Thank you, Representative Slotkin. And not only do we represent the state of Michigan, between your district and my district, we represent almost the whole state of Michigan, not just 2 districts. I think we probably would be 60+% of the landmass. We will now hear from our witnesses, then move on into the question and answer session. Assistant Secretary Maier, we will begin with you.
Well, thank you, Chairman Bergman, and Ranking Member for today, Slotkin, and distinguished members of this committee. Thank you for providing this opportunity to testify on the global posture of our nation's Special Operations Forces, or SOF. I'm honored to appear alongside General Fenton. I could not ask for better teammates in both General Fenton and Command Sergeant Major Shane Shorter in ensuring your SOF enterprise is prepared to address the threats facing the United States today and in meeting the challenges to come. I start with thanking Congress and especially this committee, this subcommittee, for your enduring support of the men and women of SOF. I am particularly grateful for your assistance in building the organization I lead, Special Operations and Low Intensity Conflict, with dedicated and gifted public servants. Sitting before this committee last year, I testified that we were at an inflection point in SOF's transformation to focus more on the pacing challenge of China and the acute threat posed by Russia, while maintaining enduring capabilities to counter violent extremist organizations, address Iran's destabilizing behavior, and conduct no-fail crisis response around the globe. Today, in updating you on progress and the work that remains, I will highlight 3 areas: SOF's ongoing transition in support of the National Defense Strategy, the development of SOLIC, and our continued emphasis on empowering and supporting our people. First, we are transforming the SOF enterprise to achieve the goals of the NDS. While SOF's role in counterterrorism is widely understood and appreciated, my team and I work daily to ensure the value proposition of SOF in integrated deterrence and campaigning against strategic competitors is accounted for and incorporated into the department's processes. As it has been in every major military challenge this nation has confronted since World War II, your SOF will play an essential role. To start, the deep relationships SOF has forged with allies and partners over the last 2 decades, often through shared challenges and sacrifice, has produced an international SOF enterprise that provides unique firsthand understanding of the global operating environment. It also has enhanced the resilience of allies and partners to resist aggression. Second, drawing on those relationships and our ability to reach some of the most difficult locations on the globe, your SOF formations provide unique access and placement that creates options for our nation's leaders. And SOF is adept at creating dilemmas for our adversaries. Here, I would highlight the many years of our investment in transforming Ukrainian forces into the highly capable force that is consistently outperforming Russia on the battlefield. Representing the value that SOF brings to the joint force is one of my primary responsibilities, and we continue to make progress institutionalizing SOLIC's role as Congress has directed. Through my role providing civilian leadership for the organize, train, and equip of SOF, we have established over the last year in the department a series of recurring processes and delivered key outcomes for the SOF enterprise. For example, the Special Operations Policy Oversight Council that I chair provides a senior-level forum to address SOF unique challenges across the department. We also have made progress on important initiatives to deter our adversaries and fill warfighting gaps, especially on irregular warfare and information operations. I'm also proud that SOLIC played a central role in the department's landmark Civilian Harm Mitigation and Response Action Plan. Finally, I would emphasize that the first SOF truth remains truer today than ever. Humans are more important than hardware. None of our efforts are possible without our most important resource, our people. With the strong support of Congress, we continue to evolve the Preservation of the Force and Families, or POTF program, to address SOF unique challenges and to optimize physical, psychological, social, spiritual, and now cognitive performance. We also continue to prioritize a diverse, capable force by removing barriers to participation and advancement in SOF, an operational imperative if we are to succeed in an ever more complex geopolitical environment. Recent publicized challenges remind us that we must continue to evaluate our approaches to force employment, accountability, and most importantly, present and engaged leadership. A healthy SOF culture that reflects our nation's values is essential to readiness and core to ensuring we remain the most lethal SOF enterprise the world has ever known. Investing in our people is a cornerstone of ensuring your SOF are ready to take on our nation's toughest challenges, because it is not a question of if, but when the call will come. Mr. Chairman and distinguished members of this committee, I thank you again for your partnership and support and for the opportunity to testify today. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Secretary Maier. And General Fenton, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Bergman, Ranking Member, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. Thank all of you for the opportunity to appear before you today. I'm honored to testify alongside the Honorable Chris Maier, and I'm equally honored to be here on behalf of the dedicated men and women of U.S. Special Operations Command. Joining me today is Command Sergeant Major Shane Shorter, U.S. SOCOM's senior enlisted leader. Command Sergeant Major Shorter is representative of the incredible U.S. SOCOM team, particularly our non-commissioned officer corps. Our non-commissioned officers are the backbone of our military and a decisive advantage within your special operations community, and they make us the envy of every military around the world. We are thankful for the leadership and support of Congress, particularly this subcommittee. Congress had the vision and determination to establish U.S. SOCOM almost 36 years ago. Thank you for this subcommittee's steadfast support ever since. Your special operations forces remain a national advantage as we enter a decisive era, an era where strategic competitors such as the PRC and Russia seek to reshape the rules-based international order. In response, your special operations forces strengthen and sustain deterrence globally as part of our approach to integrated deterrence. With SOF's World War II origins and DNA rooted in decades of experience in strategic competition, now building upon 20-plus years of hard-won combat credibility, your SOF provide creative, tailorable, and asymmetric options for our nation, while create dilemmas for any competitor. As part of the broader joint force, your SOF campaign every day to deter and prevent aggression, counter coercion, close warfighting gaps, and tackle shared challenges alongside allies and partners, all in support of accelerating strategic momentum towards NDS objectives. Yet your SOF also remained vigilant in protecting our homeland and U.S. interests from the persistent threat posed by global terrorist networks. In doing so, your SOF worked tirelessly alongside a trusted network of allies and partners, U.S. interagency counterparts, and our joint force teammates to disrupt VEOs wherever they may be. And while we campaign for integrated deterrence and counter violent extremists, your SOF's capabilities to respond to crisis represent a critical strategic hedge and advantage for our nation. Agile, tailored, modernized capabilities enable us to undertake sensitive, high-risk missions, crucial to safeguarding and, when necessary, rescuing our citizens and protecting vital national interests. Foundational to all these efforts remains our collaborative partnership with ASD Solik, Chris Maier, and his team. The oversight, policy guidance, and advocacy provided by ASD Solik are essential for the modernization, readiness, well-being of SOF units and our families. And together, we are committed to placing people as our #1 shared priority. We're preparing for the future by investing in them and by leveraging our nation's diverse talent to solve diverse challenges. And to those listening today who might be considering service to our nation, know the profound sense of calling and purpose those of us serving in uniform and SOCOM share. We know that a deeply rewarding journey lies ahead for all those who choose to join. You will be part of an incredible team of men and women tackling the toughest challenges for our nation. Earlier this week, I had the great privilege of hearing from Colonel Retired Paris Davis, our nation's most recent Medal of Honor recipient and a Green Beret. At Monday's ceremony to induct him into the Pentagon's Hall of Heroes, he summed up his military service and special operations service in 3 words: purpose, opportunity, and pride. And as we speak here today, more than 5,000 service members of U.S. SOCOM are deployed who share his sense of purpose and pride, defending our nation and standing shoulder to shoulder with allies and partners in over 80 countries to make our world a safer place. The courage and commitment of our special operations community and our military inspires the Command Sergeant Major and me daily. We are immensely proud to serve with them, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you, General Fenton. Mr. Jackson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to both of our witnesses for being here today. Appreciate your time. The Special Operations community is obviously one of our greatest assets in defense of our country. For the past 20 years, special operators have carried a heavy burden during the war on terror, fighting not against uniformed soldiers under a defined flag, but rather against networks of non-state actors uniting under a loose ideology. While terrorism remains a threat warranting our vigilance, we must focus on state actors with significant economic, political, and military influence now, namely China, Russia, Korea, and Iran. The demands on our operators in the SOF community and, frankly, on their families are intense. The training is demanding, the ops tempo is high, deployment tempo is high, and often the objectives are no-fail missions. There's no doubt that while rewarding, working in the Special Operations community is stressful and even chaotic at times. Yet recruitment and retention in the SOF community remains high, especially when compared to the services as a whole, who are either barely meeting or missing their recruiting and retention goals. General Fenton, what are you guys doing differently in the SOCOM community to continue to recruit and retain your personnel? You hit on this a little bit at the end of your statement, but how do you think the Department of Defense could replicate some of the success you're having, and is there things in particular that you're doing that are leading to this success?
Congressman, thank you very much for that question. I would start that your Special Operations Command team takes in its personnel from across the services from the service components. We have a very small recruiting effort that goes external, but we are the recipients of Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and Space Guardians into the SOCOM team. And in that effect, we work very closely with the services to assist all of us in recruiting goals, certainly, and retention. And that we recognize as well, while there are recruiting challenges for services out there, we won't be immune, even though our recruiting numbers right now are very good. And at some point, that bubble will hit us. So it's in our best interest, and certainly as a teammate in the department, to work with all the services on anything that we have that we would find as best business practices. I would also mention that our retention, along with the department's retention, is at an all-time high. My sense in many ways would be first to say thanks to this Congress for the work that's gone into BAH increases, or pay increases as you think about your troops. And those certainly assist in recruiting and retaining our teammates. I would say in SOCOM, I don't know if these are the best business practices, but certainly each and every day, and the services do as well, we make sure our people know they're our number one priority. I think that has a heck of an impact on folks knowing that they're empowered, embraced, experienced, and absolutely cared for and educated as we go forward. And I think we offer very rigorous standards that are meant to be combat, and certainly a great team of teams to be a part of.
Thank you. That helps. I appreciate that. I hadn't thought in terms of recruitment, having your own farm team in place, but I guess that's kind of what you have going on. So one more question. When Special Operations really came into its own, the career field was primarily geared toward kinetic actions executed by physically fit individuals possessing mental fortitude and the ability to problem solve in real time. No doubt that those attributes are going to continue to be of huge importance to the SOF community, but with each passing day, the realities of warfare continue to evolve. Technology is developing at a breakneck speed, and every day we hear more about artificial intelligence, autonomous weapon systems, and cyber issues and cyber attacks. So, General Fenton, my question is, BUDS, obviously, the Q course, the Ranger course, they're not going anywhere, but how is SOCOM also addressing the reality that expertise in technology is going to be essential to Special Operations going forward? And do you foresee any changes or additions to the training pipeline or integration of new forces into SOCOM to augment your mission set that we haven't seen previously?
Congressman, I'll begin by saying we're always want to be ready for whatever challenges lie ahead, and frankly, stay ahead of those. In this instance, I'd say we crave talent to solve those challenges, the congested, certainly increasingly complex challenges that we get in the world. And I think it starts first, as it always has, even in World War II, when we had the OSS and people willing to parachute behind enemy lines and raise the resistance and do sabotage and subversion. And if I take that all the way from Korea, Vietnam, and then we want that person first and foremost that desires a challenge, desires hard challenges and problems to solve, and coming up with creative solutions. And I think in this day and age, that looks like teammates from cyber and space, tech, software engineers, technologists, folks who understand autonomy and uncrewed systems as much as it does the folks that came to us in those days that when that didn't exist, it was about grit, it was about determination, motivation. We need all that now in our operational layer, and certainly with critical enabling expert layer. So you'll see us chase all that talent and more as we look to certainly address adversaries and create dilemmas for them.
Thank you, sir. My time has expired. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And Representative Slotkin, you're recognized.
Great. So, you know, I think most people understand, or they think they understand the role of SOF in the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and against the al-Qaeda threat and affiliates threat. But I think it's less commonly understood the role of SOF going forward in great power competition. And I'm just conscious that this committee supported SOCOM and actually bumped up the budget request from FY23 and gave you more in every single category than was requested. Help explain in English what the different, how it's going to be different, and what you're going to be investing in differently, so that we understand sort of in colloquial terms what has changed now that we're sort of through this 20-year period and into a different period. Mr. Maier.
Well, thanks for question, Representative Slotkin. So I think it's kind of the fundamental question that we spend a lot of time working on. So I think I would say there's an element of continuity in this. We still will continue from the soft enterprise to do counterterrorism and crisis response. And there's some lessons from that that are very applicable. We will continue to work by, with, and through partners. We will continue to focus on placement and access, sometimes through those partners, sometimes through our own exquisite capabilities unilaterally. But I think what we will need to focus on more is, if we are indeed working across all domains, some of those domains have broadened from what was applicable in the fight against al-Qaeda and ISIS. So space, cyber has already been mentioned. The ability to recognize that the world is one that operating without being seen is particularly challenging. So we need more tactics, techniques, and procedures that allow us to do that. We also need more technology that allows us to do that in a very technologically enabled world.
Yeah, and on that issue, so I always remember being at the Pentagon and being incredibly jealous of SOCOM's acquisition authorities and the ability to go from either commercially available tech or just a concept. I mean, even just watching it in Syria was amazing, right? Something was needed, and SOCOM always had the ability to quickly move to contact. Can you tell me if you, A, feel like you still have all the acquisition authorities that you need for that, and then B, kind of give me an example, if you could, of how you've gone from concept to a piece of tech in the life cycle, sort of from beginning to end, how from idea to fielding, how long is it taking you to field new concepts?
So I think, Representative Slotkin, we still benefit immensely from that capability. In some respects, it's going to be even more applicable as we deal in a more complicated environment. Some of this is probably better handled in a closed session, but I think, if, broadly speaking, if you think of some of the capabilities that are so critical for more advanced intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, so we've long depended on the same sort of platforms. We're going to need capabilities that dwell for much longer and are able to operate in non-permissive environments. So there's a tremendous amount of investment in the soft enterprise, also across the department, frankly, but we think in many cases we're able to field these faster and operationally test them more quickly because we do have that ability to have an AT&L component within the command there.
And what would you say, just back of the envelope, from, you know, if you have a crew that's come to you with an idea, if you were going sort of full steam ahead, how long would it take to go to fielding, at least a test product?
So I think we have cases where we've been able to do it within a fiscal year. Other cases, depending on the complexity, will take multiple years. But I think benchmark, we're much faster than the services are, but we're also doing much smaller things. So we have an advantage there and benefit immensely from the small, many of the small businesses we're able to work with in some of the flexible ways and the authorities that this Congress has given us, ma'am.
So you all should speak up if you feel like there's additional authorities that would help turn the crank. I mean, one fiscal that you are missing, you should let us know, particularly because you do smaller scale stuff and you're not looking for like a new fixed frame, airframe, or something like that. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Mills, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming here today. General Fenton, we had a very long discussion just the other day, which I'm very appreciative for, and thank you so much for talking about the priorities of where SOCOM is looking to go and how you're looking to lead that. Having been in this role now for just 6 months, can you share with everyone what your command priorities are?
Congressman, thank you very much for that, and thanks as well for the session with you the other day. I can. When I think about it at the enterprise level, at the SOCOM enterprise level, those priorities are first and foremost people, followed by win, and then transform. And as we think about our number one priority, our people are our competitive and comparative advantage. We've seen that time and time again in the special operations community with just a very little guidance and a whole bunch of initiative and training and skill. Very complex problems are solved quickly. And we rush to those problems. So each and every day, as the Command Sergeant Major and I are part of this formation, we see it certainly in full display that our people are our number one priority. And everything we do really focuses on that, because they'll take us to the win, our second priority, across the spectrum of strategic competition, integrated deterrence, counterterrorism, and crisis response, and have done that since the origins. And I keep going back to World War II, and right afterwards with the beginning of Special Forces and UDTs that have become the SEALs, Air Commandos, Marine Raiders, and many others in our formation, even today. And they've won for decades for this nation. And we'll stay focused on that across those three missions of strategic competition, crisis response, and counterterrorism. Third priority for the enterprise is transform. And it goes first and foremost to our people. It's about this continual education of what we will require as we enter any era or decade, and certainly in this one, as we think about the PRC in Russia. It'll be a continuing education. It'll start with our Joint Special Operations University. In addition to having an acquisition executive, we have our own Special Ops University at the Special Operations Command that stays on top of that and can turn that very fast. And then that's followed by tech, data, the things that we need to compete, and not big items very often, almost a Moneyball type approach, many littles in order to get after the challenge that the PRC and certainly the Russians present. But those would be the priorities. Representative, thank you for that.
Well, thank you so much, General Fenton. And after having talked to you earlier, I have no doubt that you'll be able to achieve in all those, and that SOCOM's in a great position under your leadership. Switching to you, Assistant Secretary Maier. In 2020, the National Defense Strategy had an irregular warfare annex. And in this, it talked a lot about great power competition and upcoming strategies. Have we continued to fulfill that 2020 annex, and have we continued to put that into the field in a strategic way?
Congressman, it's a really important question, I think, as we talk about the tools from a more policy and framework perspective that we will need going forward. So I think the answer to your question is yes, we've done a number of things. There is no more irregular warfare annex. It's integrated into the 2022 National Defense Strategy. We have a process underway that's bringing the department across the spectrum from doctrine to policy to operations and resourcing, training, all those tools that make the world go round in the Pentagon and in the Joint Force to actually not only apply irregular warfare, but look for new opportunities to apply it in other cases. So I think this is one of my priorities. I have three. It's one of those three, and we're very much pushing in conjunction with Special Operations Command on that. I would just add that we think irregular warfare is the responsibility of the Joint Force. SOF may be in the lead for it, but it can't be a SOF-only endeavor, sir.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And in knowing that, you know, we do have the geopolitical alignment of China, Russia, Iran, North Korea. We see what Chairman Xi's doing with advancing his Road and Belt Initiative, which is more focused on an economic resource, cyber-based warfare. We know that the one thing that Chairman Xi and Russia lacks is our non-commissioned officer corps. This is something that every one of our adversaries try to build up and become robust, but they cannot meet the United States when it comes to this. The second thing Chairman Xi said is that he can outpace us militarily and economically, but innovation is a real key. Do we look at things like quantum entanglement for AI autonomous drone systems with regards to communication platforms, and also how we would be able to field those more accurately with the SOCOM communities? Either.
Representative, I'll take that one, because I'm going to start. I absolutely agree with your description of our non-commissioned officer corps throughout our entire military, and in particular, I've lived in this formation for almost 30 years in your special operations community. I spoke a bit about it in the opening statement, but if I could pull it a little tighter, every military in the world looks towards U.S. military because of a very key thing. And more often than not our equipment, it's not a number of other things that folks might think. It is our non-commissioned officer corps. They want to be the U.S. military because of our non-commissioned officer corps. Always have been, always will be. Any military we engage with, one of their first requirements is build us a non-commissioned officer corps. Give it mission command type orders, initiative, all the techniques and procedures. And they ask that because they know they'll be incredibly better off as a result. And we certainly appreciate when they ask that. On your technology discussion, we absolutely are pursuing those type of technologies. I would say in the acquisition priorities area for me, and has been stated thus in the 23, certainly in our 23 budget, was anything, the AI, autonomous, uncrewed, and much of that really revolves around an artificial intelligence application that could sit on the data, give us a decision advantage, and then on top of that, really work to get these systems in the right place to achieve the right effects. And as quantum comes into, I call our radar screen to be more usable, we'll absolutely pursue that as well. Anything that gives us an advantage, a comparative and competitive advantage, already we're the best military in the world, but we're not satisfied. We want to continue to strive, and your SOCOM team's right there with them.
Thank you so much for your service, and I really appreciate it. With that, I yield back.
Thank you. And just so you know, I know that Secretary Maier and General Fenton, you cannot see the time clock. So what's going to happen is, as we move forward here, Mr. Green, when there's a minute left, will stand up and do the old hand and arm signals. So in the respecting time, that's how we'll do it in the old manual way. Representative Jacobs, you're recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Assistant Secretary Maier and General Fenton, for testifying before us today. As a representative of San Diego, I have to say I am always so proud of the SEALs, of our Delta troops. I think they are the best in the business, and it's clear that they are willing to do the most dangerous missions with very little notice, and I think we should all be incredibly grateful for that. I think part of our job on this committee is to make sure that we are asking them to do the right missions when we're sending them out into harm's way. And so I wanted to pull us up a little bit and ask about the strategic level. We've talked a lot about the pivot to great power competition and how when we're going to do counterterrorism moving forward, it's going to be more by, with, and through, more over the horizon, smaller footprints, lighter counterterrorism. I would argue that's actually how we've been doing counterterrorism in sub-Saharan Africa for the past 20 years. In sub-Saharan Africa, U.S. Special Forces have been conducting counterterrorism training for over 2 decades, and we've provided over $3 billion in related equipment, training, and logistics. And General Fenton, I want to ask you, would you characterize this effort in sub-Saharan Africa as a success?
Congresswoman, I'm certainly in constant contact with Africa Command as they look at this through their lens and a number of other whole-of-government efforts. I think it's necessary. Because as we've put in our written posture statement, the VEO threat still persists, even though it's been disrupted, and we've got to remain vigilant as we think about ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and certainly Al-Shabaab and their desires, certainly always to attack homeland and partners and allies.
Yeah, and I certainly agree with you that getting our counterterrorism mission right, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, is really important. But I actually want to point out that despite our billions of dollars in investments and the incredible bravery and professionalism of our Tier 1 operators, we've actually seen, and it's just a fact, that violent extremism has increased over 3-fold since 2013, as you can see on this poster. And just in the last year, according to the Africa Center for Strategic Studies, which is a research institute within DoD, just in the last year, violent extremist violence has increased by 22%, with fatalities surging over 50%. And just in the Sahel alone, violence has seen a 130% increase since 2020. So I guess as we're talking about using these strategies in other parts of the world, how is SOCOM thinking about the lessons from this clear lack of success so that we're not recreating it both as we move forward in sub-Saharan Africa and in other parts of the world? General Fenton.
Representative, thank you very much for that. I'll start, as we continue, we'll do it the way we have been doing it, which is one part of the whole of U.S. government effort that gets after countering VEOs. That's in concert with the combatant commands, where we, as a SOCOM team, operate. They have special operations elements there that campaign, contest, and coordinate all of our activities in that arena, and as well with our Department of State and Intel and interagency colleagues and partners and allies. So we'll continue that as one part. Second, I think I would say across all the various domains, information operations, to get after an unconstrained ideology that still exists out there in the violent extremist way, and use capability tools, and certainly partner and allied thoughts as we go forward to contain, in some ways, the physical terrain in places, Syria and Iraq, that we've been able to do against ISIS.
Thank
So
you.
think
I
it's
don't
a
mean to cut
long-term
you off. I
trend.
just want to make sure I get to my last question for Assistant Secretary Maier. I think as we've talked a lot, one of the main lessons is that the military first DoD-led approach to violent extremism is clearly not working. You are the point person for DoD on the bipartisan Global Fragility Act, and a part of that law is, quote, that all DoD activity in priority countries will be in joint formulation and with the concurrence of the Secretary of State. Given that that is part of the law, will you commit today to ensure the department abides by that and only implements policy or conducts activities in all GFA priority countries that have been developed through joint formulation with the State Department and through Secretary of State concurrence, including as it relates to all Title 10 and Section 127 ECHO and 1202 programs?
So, Congresswoman, it's a very important thing, I think, the Global Fragility Act, because it gets at your core question of trying to do things differently than we've done to the past to trit some of those trend lines you showed. I think as a matter of practice on GFA, we are aiming as much as possible to be that 3Ds concept, the development, diplomacy, and then our defense piece. All the plans and programs are developed jointly, all three agencies, USAID, state, and DoD. And I think as we've talked about in the past, both our 127 ECHO programs and other Title 10 programs are done in concurrence with the State Department. The Chiefs of Mission concur on those programs, as do other elements of the U.S. government. So I think that's an important safeguard against any perception that DoD is doing things that aren't in concert with the President's priorities and the interagency's concerns and also perspectives, ma'am.
Well, thank you. And I'll just remind you that that joint formulation is part of the law. And so I'll look forward to working with you as we move forward. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. And noted here that we have two representatives named Jackson on this subcommittee. So henceforth, it'll be Mr. Jackson of Texas and Mr. Jackson of North Carolina. Mr. Jackson of North Carolina, you are recognized.
Good afternoon, Jim. Sir, you've been on the job for about 6 months, which is long enough to learn your way around, but not long enough so that any problem is necessarily of your making. It's kind of the sweet spot for reflecting on leadership and vision and sort of where you plan on taking things. And my first question is, what do you know now that you didn't know the first day you assumed this command?
Congressman, I think I know more now about how important SOF's role is going to be as we go forward in this era of increasingly dangerous challenges in the strategic competition space with the PRC and Russia, and that we still have to absolutely stay and remain vigilant on the counterterrorism mission, getting after the CVEO threat, while the sacred obligation to certainly rescue our U.S. citizens and safeguard them around the world remains. I don't think before I got in this job I recognized the totality and how we will probably be needed more fold going into the future.
I've listened to your remarks and I've read the memo here. This is a simple question, but is there anything that you need, truly need, that you just don't have? Are there any glaring deficiencies on which this subcommittee should be focused in the short term?
Congressman, I don't have any glaring requirements right now that we need, except the continued support of this Congress, your ability to understand how important your special operations team will be going forward, that your special operations forces, in my estimation, as we proceed in this era, will be, in our capability, very decisive in preventing aggression, deterring, and really addressing coercion, because it's in our DNA. We've done this for almost 70-plus years before the global war on terrorism. We never stopped, and we're absolutely needed to continue that even now. Key to that is certainly partnerships and allies, and the training and the combat credibility we bring into that mission area.
I don't know exactly how to phrase this question, but I know you mentioned that one of your top 3 priorities was people. And I don't know if everyone fully appreciates the extent to which the service members under your command just participate in an op tempo that is not necessarily experienced by all of our service members, that you all deal with an elevated op tempo, and you certainly did for the last 2 decades. With the conclusion of Operation Enduring Freedom, has there been an intentional, deliberate effort on your part or your immediate predecessor to give some breathing space to some service members who just got pulled as tight as any could ever be pulled for the last decade? Some of them served in excess of a decade. You said that retention rates exceed standard, so that tells me something good. But there are just a ton of horror stories that come out of this space in particular because of the level of stress derived, my understanding is, from the op tempo. Has there been this is a unique period where we are perhaps in between major contingency operations. Are we working on giving these folks some mental health and a bit of a breath?
Congressman, thank you very much for that question. It does hit at the heart of our #1 priority, our people. As I think about this, my sense is there has been a slowdown in the tempo of how we've been addressing both counterterrorism and crisis response for the last 20 years. That's allowed us to do a number of things. Re-educate in terms of how we will go forward in the future, and that is often an opportunity for folks to be at home, to do that education in not only our Joint Special Operations University, but also in the schoolhouses throughout all of our components in Special Operations Command. We've had an opportunity to experiment and exercise, and that's really important as we think about the challenges the PRC and Russia will throw at us. And that's been extremely helpful in figuring out some new options for combatant commanders and dilemmas for the adversary that we didn't have when we were going at a pace in the CT fight. I think it's given us a chance as well to really fold around our service members our POTF program that looks at a number of domains, not to mention the cognitive and the behavioral. I think all of that has been a very good thing for this formation as we think about being needed many-fold more as we go forward in strategic competition through crisis response and counterterrorism.
Thank you, sir. I yield back.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Representative Maier, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Gallego, for this hearing today. General, it's good to see you. Again, we appreciate both of you being here to answer our questions today. I just had my first hearing. I'm a subcommittee chairman on oversight of cyber technology and innovation. And I just had my first hearing on oversight yesterday with Dr. Eric Schmidt on the subject of AI and emerging technologies. And this is a guy who was one of the original folks at Google, original CEO, former CEO. And he said that AI, the advent of AI, what's going to happen is going to transform the world. And it's going to be epic. It's going to happen fast. And in my sense in being here, I'm just over 2 years in now, but it feels like DOD, Pentagon, military, you all are going to have it together better, faster, more before the rest of the federal government. But I have great concerns just at what some of our vulnerabilities may be, both from a defensive and offensive side of things. And so I just wanted to ask, sort of just pick your brain a little bit today, if you can share with us a little bit about SOCOM and some of your investments in emerging technology. How do we retain our competitive advantage? What I learned yesterday is that the country of China, the largest nonprofit that's invested in AI in the world is in China. And so I'd just like to hear a little bit from you all, sort of your perspective, just kind of high level, and some of the emerging technologies that you all have seen us invest in, and kind of get your perspective on that too.
So, Congresswoman, it's very important. I think we often throw out AI, and there's a lot of different components of this. I'll give you a couple examples, and then I know General Fenton has actually had Eric Schmidt out to the command and can probably talk in even greater detail. But you know, especially as we look at it in the information space, we are not, as a department, despite your hope for us, very fast in that space, and our adversaries use AI to generate things like deep fakes and all kinds of other things that have the benefit of distracting and misleading, and sometimes that's just enough space to be able to do what they want to do. So we have to think about this on the defensive side as much as we think about this on the offensive side. I think some of what we envision using AI for is to reduce some of the delays of human beings in the loop or on the loop. Some of that might be in the information space, but some of that could be in traditional warfighting capabilities or the ability to take in large quantities of data and gain situational awareness. But still, at some point, probably there's going to be a human being that makes a decision, especially as we talk about things that may be lethal or kinetic in that process. So there's an ethics piece of this. There's a functional man-machine interface that's going to have to be worked out. And there's also I think the question of which types of technology do you invest in to actually get the biggest bang for the buck, because if you choose wrongly, you may end up being even further behind. But maybe,
Yeah,
General
and to your
Fenton.
point too, it's not just software, it's hardware too. I mean, there are multiple components. There have to be, you know,
Yes, ma'am.
human intelligence involved, but General.
Congresswoman, thank you very much for that. I'll go, it hits at the heart of where we're working to transform and our transform priority. And we have had a number of meetings with Dr. Schmidt and many of his teammates and
He's brilliant on
and
this.
many
yeah.
others in that community. And I would start on a couple fronts. Artificial intelligence and what it brings in terms of the applications. First and foremost for us is about putting those applications over oceans of data that we have in the department, certainly from our counterterrorism years, but even before that, understanding of locations we've been in previously, all of that, and using those applications to crush that information, synthesize it for us, and get it to us with speed. And in special operations, we had an extra S to that with speed, soft speed, so we can make a decision faster either for our teammates on the ground or at the mission command nodes. I think the second reason is that decision is important is because it allows us to not only make a decision, but put the effects to be achieved in the right place faster than any adversary. And that could be in the information operations domain, or it could be a kinetic domain, or any number, cyber and space. So I think you will absolutely see us continue to pursue it in that arena. And if folks asked even more, it would be natural language processing and things like picture generation. All of this is important.
It's
Not only-
generative, it's machine learning, it's
That's right.
all these things. It's all encompassing what we're learning. And I apologize for cutting you short, but this to piggyback on that, the intersection of government and industry, like how is that going? Is that been more efficient in trying to make those decisions?
Your SOCOM team is routinely reaching out to all those, academia, industry. We even go overseas to partners and allies. We just don't look here. So we're in search of that technology with anybody that has it, both to use it and understand how the adversary uses it.
Thank you, General. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. And Representative McClellan, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Slotkin for putting this hearing together, and I want to thank our witnesses for being here today. This is my first hearing since being sworn in as a member of Congress, and I look forward to working with this subcommittee to strengthen and improve our special forces and maintain American leadership in this space. And I have a few questions for both of you. First, we are now 1 year into the war in Ukraine, a conflict that has seen immense conflict in the information and digital sphere. What has U.S. Special Operations Forces and Command learned from this conflict, and is SOCOM ready to implement those lessons learned?
So Representative McClellan, welcome. Wish it was my first hearing, but it's not. So I think there's a lot of lessons learned. Some of these probably better handled in a different session, but I'll give you a couple off the bat. First off, we've had a long-standing relationship with Ukraine, and I think it goes to that fundamental principle: invest early and be prepared, because you can't manufacture partnerships or teaming when crisis hits. So you asked specifically about the information space. We've had long-standing relationship with not only the Ukrainians, but others in the region to help share lessons learned and really expand on our ability to deal with misinformation, disinformation that we know Russia is apt to use, but also be able to get the message out for our own forces. And I think Ukrainians have demonstrated a tremendous aptitude to do that. I think also the long-standing investment in the personal relationships that we have had through our 10th Special Forces Group with the Ukrainians and in Europe is really something you can't replicate when you have a situation of a crisis as the Ukrainians have experienced. So there's lots of elements to it, lots of lessons learned, I think, that we are actively looking at from the SOF enterprise, but I'd give you those as two pretty clear ones.
Thank you, General Fenton.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman. I would echo that and just pull a little tighter on invest early. It is the power of partnerships with allies and nations around the world. We started in the 90s, but we got it spiked in earnest in 2014 in Ukraine. Spiked in earnest in 2014 when the first invasion, and that partnership, the relationship, the speed of trust that had already been worked through, allowed us to get to the place we are now, where the Ukrainian SOF have done a phenomenal job against the Russians. Second would be the power of investing in partners and allies around that, around Ukraine. For us, special operations, we worked very closely with European SOF, up and down and in the Baltics, and that has paid off. They are doing it the U.S. Special Operations way of warfare, as either they're inside of Ukraine or they're training alongside us, and that makes us exponentially better and certainly more powerful. And then lastly, the power and the increasing advantage and competitive advantage of technology, like we just spoke about. Open source, one-way strike drones, counter UAS, all this is very important. We've seen it in previous incursions, and we're seeing it front and center right now.
Thank you. And in your statement, for the record, you discussed the importance of investing in the men and women serving in SOF, and you mentioned several times here the importance of the people, your people. Can you expand on the work that SOCOM is employing to develop a highly trained and diverse workforce?
Congresswoman, I can. It's my favorite thing to talk about. I'll probably get the signal on the back. But number one, it's about talent. In our people as comparative advantage, it's about we seek talent any domain. And in our instance, we talk about cognitive, experiential, and demographic. We want talent in the formation because we know what happens when we get it, we win. We think about in terms of announcing to anybody and anyone, please come to the SOCOM formation and give us a shot. We want to then embrace it, empower it, and educate so that our people, at the end of the day, continue to be the winning recipe for the SOCOM team. So the number of efforts, I'm happy to take that for the record and give you a more fulsome piece just in the interest of time. But we absolutely believe it's a mission imperative and an operational requirement to continue to invest in our people and have certainly across cognitive, experiential, and demographic domains, a talented force to solve the complex, diverse challenges we'll have in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Panetta, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Outstanding. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, good afternoon. Thank you for being here. General Fenton, after Crimea was annexed in 2014, we established a joint multinational training program to bring conventional and special operators across NATO to train Ukraine's military. We also then established a qualification course, a Q course, as they call it, to train the Ukrainian troops. Obviously, I think as we're seeing, that training has been pretty decisive on the battlefield. I was wondering if you can give an update as to what exactly is in those trainings, and then any particular lessons that we've learned watching it take effect on the battlefield today.
Congressman, thank you very much for that. I speak just the special operations piece of the entirety of training that was going on in European Command at the time, but I'll start with the qualification course. The qualification course, at its very nature, is designed to build someone who has an approach that has cognitive, physical, and other domains in its very nature that can go through hardships, continue to do as the Ukrainians are doing, fight this existential threat, who shoot at a very high proficiency level, communicate with the equipment that we were able to bring them, and certainly can maneuver in a way that avoids the type of work that the Russians are trying to, certainly the ammunition and armament the Russians are bringing. We also taught a bit about a resistance concept, this idea of how sabotage, subversion, the things that would be in a resistance type of kit bag would be very important if and when something like this happened. The Ukrainian Special Operations Forces not only embraced all of it, they engulfed it, and are certainly the superb force that I spoke about and have spoken about before that they are today, and certainly taking it to the Russians. I think in information operations, there was an important piece to ensure that the Ukrainian military and then they with their government and others understood the misinformation campaign coming at them from the Russians even before 2014, but certainly 2014 and even now. And then on the other side, an idea how to really harness the power of the Ukrainian people towards that existential threat. I think there are, the last one I would really highlight, Representative, is we built a non-commissioned officer corps. We took them from a Soviet-style military. You can see what happens to those right now. Russians are not even the second best military in Ukraine. The Ukrainians are the very best, and not even near in the world anymore that the Russians had at one time. But I'll tell you, the NCO Corps is the difference maker, and we built that as well.
Outstanding. Switching continents, I've had the fortunate opportunity to visit our operators from Bagadogle to Bamako to Agadez to Wallam to Diffa to Najima. And what I found is that they do a hell of a lot with very little, unfortunately. Now, obviously, in many of those places, imminent duty pay is afforded to service members across the Sahel, including those in Chad, Mali, and Niger, but not in Burkina Faso, despite the country witnessing 2 coups in less than 1 year and an uptick in violence from BEOs. And we now have reasons to believe that Wagner has already made a presence in that area, with French forces being expelled from that country. We know that there's been a submission by AFRICOM, U.S. AFRICOM, to request that the SecDef puts imminent danger pay afforded to these service members in Burkina Faso. And there's spillover threads from neighboring Mali and Chad. And why, if you can let us know why it's important to provide them with that imminent danger pay, especially when you have that, in affording that from Mali and Chad as well to those service members.
Congressman, I've personally been in the African continent, everywhere from East Africa and Somalia all the way through Mali, Mauritania, Niger, and the locations you're addressing. The work our teammates do is at the front edge of very often not only the challenging conditions that you find in an austere base, logistically, communications, and a number of our different operating systems and base support, but the very edge of what they may encounter when they're in support of AFRICOM addressing the ISIS threat and other threats that are out there. I would be, Congressman, I'll take this for the record and look into the fact that hazard pay has been addressed by AFRICOM.
Please.
I'd like to take that one for the record and certainly get back to you on that one.
Please do, and I look forward to working with you on that. Thank you, gentlemen. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Luttrell, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Mr. Secretary General. Great to see you again, sir. Sergeant Major. Always great to see you, sir. Mr. Secretary, I'm going to ask you a question. Earlier today, I was briefed by Secretary Sherman, the Chief Information Officer, and Mr. Martell, the Chief Digital and AI Officer at the DoD. And the question was asked multiple times if we are in lockstep or behind or in front of China when it comes to our artificial intelligence capabilities. And the doctor said, not only are we in stride with, but we are most likely ahead of. But I'm pretty sure I just heard you say that we're not.
So, Congressman, I think I would defer to them. They're the experts on this. I think what I was saying in responding to Representative Mace's question is that we're in competition with them in the application of AI. So technology, that is absolutely John Sherman and others' job to know on. We just have anecdotal examples in the operational space where in some cases it's less about the AI technology and more about their risk acceptance and ability to do things in a disinformation, misinformation way than we might be inclined to do, sir.
Here's my concern is, so they gave an example from sensor to shooter. In general, this is where I'm going to need your help. This is a request, okay? And Mr. Secretary, I'm not coming after you, okay? I just want to make sure that we're very clear on this, because this, from what I understand, this organization that Mr. Martell is a new organization inside the DoD, which we've had 2 to 3 of these similar organizations, correct?
It is an amalgamation of previous organizations,
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So from sensor to shooter, the idea is that we take quality data in order to better enforce and inform and train our shooters. Now, my question was, who's setting the criteria? Where is the data coming from? Because if the inclusion is information from the shooter to the scientist, I would hate for the bureaucrats here at DC to sit up and brief us, but our operators are completely in the dark. So my request is, General, is that you need to keep them honest, because this is a great idea, a great concept. I'm 100% behind artificial intelligence, machine learning, and advancing our opportunities for the individuals on the ground. But my concern is, like I said, is that it won't come to fruition. So, General, would you help us out on that?
Congressman, I absolutely will. I will. I'll stay on it. And what I would tell you, we are absolutely integrated with Secretary Maier and the department on this. We recognize that first, our challenge is a couplefold. We've got to get data from all the services, all the COCOMs, and frankly, anywhere, even as it relates sometimes to a personnel action. So that idea of how that data comes in, the structured, unstructuring of it, we are absolutely pursuing that right now. When it comes to operations, we assess it'll be the same challenge. So you got my commitment, Congressman, to stay absolutely integrated on this and to be a key part of it as it pertains to special operations, sensor to shooter, and frankly, taking care of our people in the people as number 1 priority space.
Thank you, sir, because I'm sure you understand the silos that each individual serves, especially in the special operations. Like, I would never talk to a ranger, no offense, just not my thing. But you can understand the silos that we work in. So it's going to take you, sir, from the top to break those silos down and make sure the information is being shared for Mr. Martell so he can do his job effectively. So thank you. I yield back, sir.
Okay. So now, you know, Mr. Luttrell, we're going to talk to everybody. Okay. No, I know. The point is, number one, thanks to all the members of the subcommittee for the focused nature of your questions. Secretary Maier, General Fenton, thank you for the focused nature of your answers. Because as we try to communicate and do the right thing here on the subcommittee, we need to be listening. And I mean, if we can't throw some friendly jabs in the inter-service cult nature of things, then shame on all of us. We've lost our ability to actually be adaptable in the fight. And that's what makes us successful. But from the higher level point here, Secretary Maier, how can Congress better enable the soft enterprise to compete in great power competition? For example, do we need to permanently authorize irregular warfare authorities and or strengthen other authorities, or, you know, add some, reduce some? How do we, from the congressional point of view, really kind of streamline what we're doing to help you streamline? I know that's overuse of the word stream, but the point is, any thoughts on what we might do authorities-wise?
Chairman, thanks for the question. I think, as been highlighted by Representative Mills in my opening statement here, irregular warfare is going to be a very important tool going forward, and I think with that, there's probably some maturing in the authorities framework. So, Section 1202, which this committee has worked on in the past, I think is one that we could use your help on. I think at a staff level, we're already working on that, but it's an area where having that authority then allows us to introduce some concepts and also do experimentation in some respects, but most importantly allows us to get tight with our partners who want to work with us against the PRC and Russia, but don't want to do that as an overt way as some of our other authorities prompt us to do. So that'd be one, sir. And then I think the continued support from this committee for my office, ASD Solic, not because it's a nameless, faceless element of the bureaucracy in the Pentagon, but because of the authorities we have to really be that articulator of the soft value proposition, that advocate in the department. The fact that I sit with the Secretary of the Navy, Secretary of the Army, and Secretary of the Air Force when the Secretary of Defense calls together service secretaries, I think is an important role that allows us to do some of the things that your committee members have asked today. Are we doing? And we can continue to keep that top-down pressure on the enterprise, sir.
Yeah, what I heard you say was, seat at the table, or said a different way. If you're not at the table, you're on the menu, so to speak.
Sir, I think there's a lot of competing interest in the department. If there isn't a voice for one, it's really at the mercy of where it falls in the prioritization for very busy senior people, sir.
Yeah, thank you. And General Fenton, we've talked a lot about people, recruiting, training, retention, ability to execute the mission. We can build a lot of really cool things. Tools, but those tools ultimately, in most cases, have to be used by human beings, your operators. Can you explain how any potential manpower cuts to SOF could restrict SOCOM's ability to operate in a non-permissive environments when shaping the environment for the Joint Force to operate against strategic adversaries? Putting where you are in the fight, in the lead, whatever it happens to be, it's manpower is critical. Thoughts, comments?
Chairman, thank you for that. Certainly a couple comments. I'd start with anything that degrades or impacts or decreases either personnel or fiscal resources would hurt. It would impact your special operations team. And I say that through the lens of we certainly have a wide array and remit for very high priority missions. Counterterrorism still, it still persists in the VEO space. We've got to stay vigilant. Crisis response is strategic competition. And as I would say a very small portion of both personnel and fiscal resources, maybe 3% of the population and 2% of the budget, your SOCOM team, any degradation of that capability, Chairman, would absolutely hurt. And I would assess, and I'd have to do some additional study, impact our ability going forward. And I think about it in terms of not only our operational teammates who are incredible across the array of Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, but our critical facilitators in terms of communications, electronics, logistics. It all makes up your SOCOM team. So I'll just wrap it up, Chairman, by saying any of that would hurt and impact your SOCOM team.
Okay, thank you very much. Basically, the open portion of the hearing is now adjourned, and we will reconvene in room 2337 for a closed session as soon as people walk in, but in the next 8 minutes. Thank you.